She never thought love would find her in a wheelchair. Maria Delgado was 28 years old, and for the past 3 years, she had worked as a housekeeper in one of the wealthiest homes in Manhattan. Every morning, she rolled herself out of a small apartment in Queens, took 2 buses and a train, and arrived at the Whitmore estate before the sun was even fully up. Maria hadn't always used a wheelchair. When she was 24, a car accident on the Long Island Expressway had taken the use of her legs. It had also taken her job as a dance instructor, her savings, and for a long time, her hope. But it hadn't taken her spirit. Anyone who met Maria noticed it right away. The way she smiled even when her arms ached from pushing herself up ramps, the way she hummed old salsa songs while she dusted bookshelves she couldn't quite reach without stretching. The Whitmore estate belonged to Ethan Whitmore, a 34-year-old real estate mogul who had inherited his father's company and turned it into something twice as large. Ethan wasn't like the men Maria had read about in magazines, cold, distant, obsessed with numbers. He was quiet, thoughtful, and strangely humble for a man worth billions. He noticed things other rich men didn't. He noticed when the staff skipped lunch. He noticed when Maria struggled to reach the top shelf in the library, and without a word, he moved his favorite books down to a lower shelf so she wouldn't have to ask for help. At first, it was small kindnesses. A cup of coffee left on her usual resting spot by the window. A ramp quietly installed at the side entrance after he noticed her taking the long way around the house. Maria told herself it was nothing. Bosses were sometimes just decent people. But over time, those small kindnesses turned into conversations. And those conversations turned into something neither of them expected. "You hum when you clean," Ethan said one afternoon, leaning against the doorway of the library, watching her carefully wipe down a shelf of old photographs. Maria froze, embarrassed. "Sorry, sir. I didn't realize I was being loud." "I didn't say stop," he said, smiling. "I said I notice." She looked up at him, unsure what to say. Nobody noticed her anymore. Not since the accident. People saw the wheelchair before they saw her face. "I used to dance," she admitted quietly. "Before." "I know," Ethan said. "I looked you up. You were incredible." Maria's cheeks burned. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or exposed. "That was a long time ago." "Doesn't mean it's gone," he said. "Just changed." Those words stayed with her long after he left the room. Over the following months, their conversations grew longer. Ethan would find reasons to walk through the rooms Maria was cleaning. He'd ask about her day, her family, her dreams, things no one in his world ever asked the household staff. Maria began to look forward to those small windows of connection, even as a part of her warned that this could only end in heartbreak. Men like Ethan Whitmore didn't fall for women like her. Not really. Not permanently. But Ethan wasn't like other men. One rainy October evening, when the rest of the staff had gone home and Maria was waiting by the entrance for her ride, Ethan found her still there, soaked from wheeling herself under a leaking awning. "Why didn't you call for the car service?" he asked, alarmed. "I didn't want to bother anyone," Maria said, shivering. Without a word, Ethan grabbed his own coat and draped it over her shoulders. Then he wheeled her himself, in the pouring rain, all the way to his private garage and drove her home himself, a billionaire driving a maid home in the rain, refusing to let his driver do it instead. That night, sitting in his car outside her small apartment building, Ethan turned to her and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "Maria, I don't care what anyone says. I don't care about the difference in our worlds. I think about you when you're not in the room. I think about your laugh, your strength, the way you never once complained even after everything life took from you. I don't want this to be one-sided anymore." Maria's heart pounded so hard she thought he could hear it. "Ethan, people will talk. Your family, your business partners. They'll never accept someone like me." "Then they can talk," he said simply. "I'm not asking them to marry you. I'm asking you." But there was something Maria didn't know yet, something that would test everything Ethan had just promised her. Because 3,000 miles away, in Los Angeles, someone else believed she already had a claim on Ethan Whitmore's heart. And she was about to fly back into his life with a diamond ring already in her purse, a ring Ethan hadn't given her, but one she planned to make sure everyone believed he had. Her name was Vanessa Cole, 29 years old, stunning, ambitious, and used to getting exactly what she wanted. And what she wanted, more than anything, was Ethan Whitmore's name attached to hers, in every newspaper, every society column, every room she ever walked into again. Vanessa didn't know about Maria yet, but she would find out soon enough. And when she did, she would do everything in her power to remind the woman in the wheelchair exactly where she believed she belonged. Maria had no idea that the greatest challenge of her life wasn't the accident that took her legs. It was still coming, and it would happen in front of 300 people under crystal chandeliers on what was supposed to be one of the happiest days of her life. Nobody warned Maria that love this real could still come with enemies. 3 months after that rainy night in the car, Ethan and Maria's relationship had grown into something neither of them tried to hide anymore. He held her hand at quiet dinners and restaurants where nobody recognized them. He learned how to help her transfer from her chair to a car seat without making it feel like a burden. He learned, slowly, patiently, what love actually meant when it wasn't about performance or appearances. But not everyone in Ethan's world was ready to accept it. Vanessa Cole had known Ethan since college. They dated briefly years ago, before his father's company exploded into the empire it was now, and before Vanessa realized just how valuable the Whitmore name could be to her own social ambitions. When she heard, through a mutual friend, that Ethan Whitmore was seriously involved with someone a member of his own household staff, no less, something cold and calculating settled behind her eyes. She flew back from Los Angeles the very next week. "Ethan, darling," she said, sweeping into his office unannounced, dressed in a designer coat and heels that clicked against the marble floor like a warning. "I heard the most ridiculous rumor. Something about you and the help." Ethan didn't flinch. "Her name is Maria. And she's not the help. She's the woman I love." Vanessa laughed, a sharp, practiced sound. "Ethan, sweetheart, I understand loneliness. Your father's passing hit you hard. But you can't seriously be considering bringing she paused, choosing her words with cruel precision, a girl in a wheelchair to the Whitmore Gala. Your board members will be there. Investors. The press." "She's coming," Ethan said flatly. "As my guest. And soon, I hope, as more than that." Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but something behind it shifted. She had come to reclaim what she believed was rightfully hers. The future Mrs. Whitmore title she'd always assumed would eventually be hers. She wasn't going to lose it to a maid. Over the following weeks, Vanessa inserted herself back into Ethan's life with practiced ease. She showed up at company events, standing just close enough to him for photographers to capture the wrong impression. She dropped comments in front of Ethan's board members. Of course, Ethan's always had a soft spot for strays, designed to sound like affection but land like an insult toward Maria. Maria felt it, even when she couldn't prove it. The subtle looks from Ethan's colleagues. The whispered conversations that stopped the moment she rolled into a room. She never said anything to Ethan directly, not wanting to seem insecure, but the weight of it sat heavy in her chest every single day. One evening, after a long shift, Maria sat in the estate's kitchen, quietly finishing a cup of tea before her ride arrived. Vanessa walked in, dressed for a dinner she clearly wasn't invited to share with the staff, and looked down at Maria with an expression somewhere between curiosity and contempt. "You know this won't last, right?" Vanessa said, casually pouring herself a glass of wine from the estate's private collection. "Men like Ethan play at things like this. Charity romances. It makes them feel good about themselves. But when it's time to actually get married, to build a legacy, host events, stand beside him at galas, he's going to need someone who can actually keep up." Maria's hands tightened around her mug, but she kept her voice steady. "Ethan doesn't need someone who can keep up. He needs someone who's honest with him." Vanessa's smile turned cold. "Honesty is cheap, sweetheart. Legacy is everything." She took a slow sip of wine, eyes flicking down toward the wheelchair. "Tell me, does he carry you up the stairs himself, or does he have someone do that for him too?" The words landed exactly where Vanessa intended them to. Maria felt her throat tighten, humiliation and anger rising together, but she refused to give Vanessa the satisfaction of a reaction. "Good night, Miss Cole," she said quietly, wheeling herself out of the kitchen before her voice could betray her. That night, for the first time since she and Ethan had grown close, Maria cried alone in her small apartment, wondering if Vanessa was right. Wondering if she really was just a phase, a charity case Ethan would eventually outgrow once the excitement of doing something different wore off. She almost didn't tell Ethan what happened. But the next morning, when he noticed the redness still lingering around her eyes, he refused to let it go until she told him everything. Ethan's jaw tightened as she spoke, his hands curling into fists on the kitchen table. "She said that to you?" "It doesn't matter," Maria said softly. "I don't want to cause problems between you and your friends." "She's not my friend," Ethan said, his voice low and firm. "And she will never speak to you like that again." But Vanessa wasn't finished. Not even close. Because 2 weeks later, Ethan's grandmother, the family matriarch, whose blessing meant everything in the Whitmore family, was hosting the engagement gala Ethan had been planning for months. An event with 300 guests, extensive press coverage, and every major name in New York high society. An event where Ethan planned to publicly propose to Maria in front of everyone who had ever doubted her. And an event where Vanessa Cole had already decided, quietly and cruelly, exactly how she was going to destroy that moment before it ever had the chance to happen. And then, in a single moment, everything Maria believed about that night shattered. The Whitmore Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Ashford Hotel, beneath 3 enormous crystal chandeliers that scattered golden light across 300 of New York's wealthiest guests. Maria had never seen anything like it. The marble floors polished to a mirror shine, the orchestra playing softly near the entrance, the smell of fresh roses filling every corner of the room. She wore a deep emerald dress Ethan had chosen for her himself, her hair pinned back the way it used to be when she danced. For the first time in 3 years, she felt beautiful again. Ethan wheeled her personally through the entrance, ignoring the stunned whispers that followed them, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder the entire time. "You look incredible," he whispered, kissing her forehead before greeting a cluster of business partners. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, Maria would later realize. Because Vanessa had been planning this night for weeks. Halfway through the evening, as champagne glasses clinked and guests mingled beneath the chandeliers, Vanessa made her move. She waited until Ethan had stepped away to speak with his grandmother near the stage, leaving Maria alone at a table near the edge of the dance floor. Vanessa approached with a group of her socialite friends trailing behind her, each one dressed in glittering gowns, each one watching with barely concealed amusement. "Maria, darling," Vanessa said loudly, her voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. "I have to ask, however did you manage to get an invitation to an event like this?" Maria's stomach tightened. "Ethan invited me." "Of course he did," Vanessa said with a laugh that wasn't kind. "Ethan's always had such a big heart. Tell me, is it hard, watching everyone dance while you sit there?" A few guests nearby chuckled awkwardly, unsure whether to laugh or look away. Maria felt her face burn, humiliation crawling up her spine, but she kept her composure. "I manage." "I'm sure you do," Vanessa said, stepping closer, her voice dropping into something sharper. "You know, it's actually quite brave of you to come tonight. Most people in your position would feel too embarrassed to be seen." She gestured toward the dance floor, where couples spun gracefully beneath the lights. "It must be difficult, watching a world you can never really be part of." The room seemed to tilt beneath Maria. Somewhere behind her, she heard someone whisper, "Is that the maid?" followed by soft, cruel laughter. Vanessa smiled, satisfied, and reached for the final blow. "I only say this because I care, Maria. Ethan is a kind man, but kindness isn't the same as forever. You do understand that, don't you? A man like him needs someone who can stand beside him, literally." Her eyes flicked deliberately, cruelly, toward the wheelchair. "Not someone who needs to be carried through life." The laughter around them grew louder. Maria felt tears burning behind her eyes, her hands trembling in her lap, 300 strangers watching the moment unfold like a spectacle. And that was when Ethan turned around. He had heard every single word. The room fell silent as Ethan Whitmore walked directly toward Vanessa, his expression darker than anyone had ever seen it. The orchestra stopped playing. Every conversation in the ballroom died at once. "Say that again," Ethan said quietly, his voice somehow more terrifying for how calm it was. Vanessa's confident smile faltered for the first time all night. "Ethan, you were simply humiliating the woman I love in front of 300 people," Ethan said, loud enough now for the entire ballroom to hear. "The same woman who lost the use of her legs saving a child from an oncoming car 3 years ago. The same woman who rebuilt her entire life from nothing while people like you sipped champagne and judged her worth by whether she could stand." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Maria's eyes widened. Ethan had never told anyone the real story of her accident. She hadn't even realized he knew the full truth himself. She'd only ever told him the barest details. "The same woman," Ethan continued, his voice shaking now with barely restrained anger, "who has shown me more grace, more strength, and more genuine love in 8 months than you managed to fake in the 4 years we dated." Vanessa's face went white. "Ethan, please, not here." "Not here," Ethan repeated, incredulous. "You chose here, Vanessa. You chose to humiliate her in front of everyone I know, everyone I work with, everyone who matters to my family. So we'll finish this here." He turned, walked back to Maria, and knelt directly in front of her wheelchair, not beside her, not standing over her, but at her eye level, in front of every single guest in that ballroom. Maria's breath caught. This wasn't how the proposal was supposed to happen. Vanessa's cruelty had ripped away every carefully planned romantic detail Ethan had spent weeks preparing. But what happened next was something neither Maria, nor Vanessa, nor a single person in that ballroom ever expected. She had never felt so exposed and so protected in the very same breath. Kneeling in front of Maria's wheelchair, in front of 300 stunned guests, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket with trembling hands. He pulled out a small velvet box, and the entire ballroom seemed to hold its breath at once. "I had this whole night planned," Ethan said, his voice unsteady, emotion breaking through the anger that had consumed him moments earlier. "Champagne toast. A slow song. My grandmother giving her blessing in front of everyone." He let out a shaky breath, glancing briefly at Vanessa before returning his eyes fully to Maria. "But maybe this is better. Maybe everyone needed to see exactly why I chose you." Maria's hands flew to her mouth, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "Ethan?" "Maria Delgado," he continued, opening the box to reveal a ring that caught the chandelier light like captured starlight. "I don't care that you use a wheelchair. I don't care what anyone in this room thinks about where you came from or what you used to be able to do. I care about who you are, the woman who hums while she works, who never once complained even when life gave her every reason to, who taught me that strength has nothing to do with how someone walks into a room." Someone in the crowd was openly crying now. Even Ethan's grandmother, watching from near the stage, pressed a trembling hand to her chest. "Marry me," Ethan said simply. "Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because I want to prove a point to people like her." He glanced once more toward Vanessa, whose face had gone rigid with humiliation. "But because you are the strongest, kindest, most extraordinary person I have ever known, and I cannot imagine building the rest of my life with anyone else." Maria could barely breathe. Every fear Vanessa had planted in her mind over the past few weeks, the whispers that she wasn't enough, that she'd always be seen as a burden, that men like Ethan didn't marry women like her, dissolved completely in that single moment. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, through tears. "Yes, Ethan. Yes." The ballroom erupted. Applause thundered through the crystal-lit room as Ethan slid the ring onto her trembling finger and pressed his forehead gently against hers, both of them crying now, unable to speak through the overwhelming joy of the moment. But not everyone was clapping. Vanessa stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. Whispers had already begun to spread, not about Maria, not anymore, but about her. "Did you hear what she said to that poor girl? I can't believe she'd mock someone in a wheelchair like that. And after everything Ethan just revealed about her accident, Ethan's grandmother, a formidable woman named Eleanor Whitmore who rarely showed emotion in public, walked directly toward Vanessa, her expression cold as winter. "You've attended galas in this family for years, Vanessa," Eleanor said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I always suspected there was cruelty hiding beneath that polish. Tonight, you confirmed it in front of everyone who matters to this family. You are no longer welcome in this house." Vanessa opened her mouth to protest, but there was nothing left to say. The room had already turned against her completely. Security quietly approached to escort her out, and for the first time in her life, Vanessa Cole walked out of a room utterly and completely alone, without a single person offering her sympathy. Maria, meanwhile, sat surrounded by well-wishers, her cheeks streaked with tears of joy rather than humiliation, Ethan's hand never once leaving hers. Guests who had laughed just 20 minutes earlier now approached her with genuine warmth, some even tearfully apologizing for staying silent during Vanessa's cruelty. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything," one older woman said softly, kneeling slightly to meet Maria's eyes. "What she did to you was disgusting. What you just showed all of us, real strength, real love. That's something I won't forget." Maria squeezed the woman's hand, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." But even amid the celebration, one quiet fear still lingered in the back of Maria's mind. Vanessa was gone, humiliated and disgraced, but she wasn't the type of person who accepted defeat quietly. Something told Maria this wasn't truly over yet, and that fear would prove itself justified sooner than she expected, in a way that would test not just her relationship with Ethan, but everything she had rebuilt about her own self-worth since the accident that changed her life. Nobody expected the final twist to come from Maria herself. 3 weeks after the gala, wedding planning had already begun in full swing. Ethan wanted a small, intimate ceremony, just close family and the friends who had actually stood by them, but Maria found herself distracted by something else entirely. A letter had arrived to her apartment, postmarked from Los Angeles, with no return name written on the envelope. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, half expecting some final act of cruelty from Vanessa. Instead, what she found inside made her sit in stunned silence for nearly 10 minutes.
It was a check.
A significant one, and a short, handwritten letter.
"Maria,
I've spent 3 weeks replaying that night over and over in my head. I told myself for years that people like you, people who lost something and had to rebuild, were somehow less than people like me. I built my entire identity around status, around being seen with the right people, in the right rooms. That night, in front of everyone, I finally saw exactly how ugly that belief really was. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am donating this money to the rehabilitation center you mentioned once, the one that helped you learn to live independently after your accident. It's the least I can do, and honestly, it's not nearly enough. I hope you have the life you deserve, Maria. I mean that." Vanessa. Maria sat with the letter for a long time, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from something closer to release. She had spent weeks quietly carrying the humiliation of that night, wondering if some small part of what Vanessa said had been true. Reading those words now, she realized the cruelty had never been about her at all. It had been about Vanessa's own fear, her own emptiness, dressed up as judgment. When Ethan came home that evening and found her crying softly at the kitchen table, he rushed to her side immediately, kneeling in front of her wheelchair the same way he had the night he proposed. "What happened? Are you okay?" Maria handed him the letter without a word. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening and then softening as he reached the end. "Do you forgive her?" he asked quietly. Maria thought about it for a long moment. "I think," she said finally, "forgiving her isn't really about her at all. It's about not letting what she said live in my head anymore. I spent 3 years thinking my worth ended the day I lost the use of my legs. That night, in front of everyone, I finally understood that wasn't true.
So yes,
I forgive her. Not because she deserves it, but because I do." Ethan pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his eyes glistening. "You are the strongest person I have ever known." 6 months later, Maria and Ethan were married in a small ceremony overlooking the Hudson River, surrounded only by the people who had truly stood beside them. Maria wore a simple white dress, her wheelchair decorated with soft ribbons and wildflowers. Ethan had picked himself that morning. There were no chandeliers, no 300 guests, no whispers of judgment. Just quiet, genuine love. During his vows, Ethan said something that made every guest reach for a tissue. "I used to think love meant finding someone perfect. Maria taught me love means finding someone real, someone who's been broken and rebuilt herself anyway, someone whose strength doesn't come from what she has, but from who she chose to become despite everything she lost." Maria, through happy tears, replied simply, "I didn't just love me despite the chair. You loved me exactly as I am. And that's the first time in 3 years I've ever truly believed I was enough." The lesson from that night at the Whitmore Gala never left Maria, and it never left the hundreds of guests who witnessed it either. True worth was never about how someone walked into a room, how much money sat in their bank account, or how flawlessly they fit into a world built on appearances. Real worth lived in resilience, in kindness, in the quiet strength to rebuild a life from nothing and still choose love, still choose hope, still choose to hum softly while working, even on the hardest days. To everyone watching this story tonight, if you've ever felt like you didn't belong in a room, if you've ever been made to feel small because of something you couldn't control, remember Maria. Remember that the people who try to diminish you are usually revealing far more about their own emptiness than anything true about your worth. You are allowed to take up space, exactly as you are. If this story touched something in you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps stories like Maria's reach more people who need to hear them. We share real, emotional stories like this every single week, stories about resilience, love, and second chances. So if you haven't already, subscribe and join our little community. I'd love to know, what part of this story hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs a reminder of their own worth today, send this video to them. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.